On Friday, Governor James sent this telegram to Washington asking for an extension of the response period to a draft environmental impact statement for a proposed estuarine sanctuary on the Apalachicola River and Bay in Florida. This negative response from OCZM was received by the governor's office. Tom DeBray, an assistant to the governor, says they need the extension so the results of a meeting of the governors of Alabama, Georgia, and Florida can be included in the final impact statement. But even then, DeBray says they are not sure any results would be included.
We really don't have a guarantee, and that was the whole focus of our attempt at getting a 30-day extension. Now, the Office of Coastal Zone Management has said that they will incorporate any agreement that is reached among the three governors into the EIS. The problem with that is the EIS will already have gone to the printers, and any agreement that's reached will have to be included as an addendum.
In the meantime, Governor James has sent a response to the Office of Coastal Zone Management objecting to the sanctuary. The governor called the draft impact statement, quote, vague, ambiguous, inconsistent, and incomplete in relation to proper evaluation of the impact of the proposal. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has a multi-million-dollar investment along the Chattahoochee River, which forms the border between Alabama and Georgia. This does not include millions in private investment on both sides. There are fears that the management of the sanctuary, if the sanctuary is granted, could alter the operations of these facilities. The final impact statement, which will be a revision of this draft released in May, will include the recommendation on the sanctuary. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
Even when he played here at the country club, I saw probably the best serve on any young man I'd seen in years. He had great action, and we put him on the Junior Davis Cup squad, and I called Barry McKay, who was coaching them that year, out on the coast, and asked him to pay particular attention to Roscoe because and help him. And of course, you know what happened. I mean, he had a loose swing back there then, and he tightened it up, and now he's got probably the world's greatest service.
Pat Dupre lived in Anniston, Alabama as a young kid and looked anything but a tennis player, from what I'm told.
Yeah, that's right. He and Jackie, my son, traveled together since they were about 10, and he was a gangly, gawky boy with big horn-rimmed glasses and no body for tennis. But it just shows what, with some ability and some dedication, what you can do, because he went out to Stanford and, you know, he developed himself, and, gee, he's a tremendous youngster, a lot of strength and stamina, and probably had the greatest wrist action as a young 13, 14-year-old player I've ever seen. This is something you can't teach. You try to impart it to kids to tell them if they're going to be good, they've got to learn how to pop the wrist and pop the ball, as the expression goes. But he had it. As a matter of fact, it was such an extreme that he developed wrist trouble in Stanford and was out with an operation for about a year and a half. But he's a terrific young man.
So we'll see two good serves when Roscoe Tanner and Pat Dupre meet.
Oh, yes, you sure will.
Last December, the Housing Authority was trying to get the Jackson Heights housing project demolished. The man they gave the contract to didn't complete the work on time, so they declared the agreement void. The contractor complained to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, saying his civil rights were violated. Now the authority has received a letter from HUD which says an investigation shows the board did not discriminate.
This board, and I believe, and all the members thereof, are dedicated and committed to performing our duties under the law without discrimination against any person, firm or corporation, or on grounds of race, color, or national origin. We carried out this policy in the case of the contract for demolition of Jackson Heights, and we have attempted to do so in all other matters in the past, and we will continue to do so in all matters in the future.
Parkett says the Jackson Heights project was blown out of proportion by politicians who wanted to get publicity. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Alabama does have a plan. If the supply of gas reaches the point of long lines at the gas pumps and outbreaks of violence over access to the tank of gasoline occurs, the state's governor, Fob James, has the plans. But according to energy official Ed Hudspeth, implementation of the plans are not expected in the near future.
The odd even, remember, is really a method that was developed for shortening lines. But the analysis of what happened in California and in other states indicates that the most effective means of preventing long lines is to have a minimum purchase requirement. This means that you cannot buy gas just to top off your tank. You have to be roughly half empty in order to buy gas, or you could set a limit that you have to buy at least $5 worth or you're not allowed to buy any. This would effectively prevent tank topping, and tank topping is what causes the long lines. People will wait in line when they have, say, half a tank or more of gas, and sometimes some of the people will fill up when they've only got about $1 worth down. I do not think at this point that we're going to have to implement any of these contingency plans this summer. However, things could change. We didn't anticipate the trucker strike that happened in June. If something happens in the Middle East to disrupt the supply of gasoline or oil to this country, we may have to go to something like that. At this point, we're not anticipating the need for either odd-even days or minimum purchase requirements in Alabama.
Here in Alabama, one gloomy fact was pointed out in our session with Energy Man Hustvedt. He said any disruption of the gas supply, no matter how minor, could cause Governor Fob James to act on the contingency plans. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
Garrett Coliseum in Montgomery has been the site of an all-day 4th of July celebration sponsored by the Tumbling Waters Museum and WHHY Radio. Events included live bands, people, games, horses, a circus, parachuters, and fireworks, or at least they had planned to have had fireworks. WHHY spokesman Larry Stevens says the fireworks were canceled when it was learned that no city permit was obtained.
The fireworks company that we asked to do the fireworks, it's their responsibility to get these permits. And they did obtain a federal and a state permit. They got both of those. Why they didn't get a city, they claim it was an oversight.
Our fire chief has to, under our ordinance, check to see if any cardiac patients anywhere around, make sure everything is proper before we would issue a permit. Nobody got a permit from the city or even applied for a permit from the city.
I question why it was such a big deal that we couldn't have the rule waived of the 10-day limit. You know, they just said, well, you didn't apply within 10 days, so you can't have the permit. I felt that, you know, they could have waived that rule if they wanted to.
The ordinance is plain. I cannot violate a city ordinance. The city ordinance directs that application must be made 10 days in advance, and the fire chief and the police chief and the city council have to act on it. Now, those are the rules, and I don't see how anybody could expect me to deviate from a city ordinance just to accommodate somebody who did not care enough about the rules to try to abide by them.
I feel like that we got a lot of pressure put back on us by the city government to not do the fireworks. I don't fully understand why as of yet.
If anybody was injured or anybody was, a cardiac patient was, had a problem as a result of it, then they could sue the city. And if the city is going to have the responsibility, then the city must have the authority. And that's where the breakdown came.
The result? Fireworks plans for this celebration had to be canceled because of the lack of the permit, but music, fun, and balloons were still available. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
It had all the trappings of a good old-fashioned 4th of July. A hot sunny day, a picnic lunch, a little refreshment, a time to be with the family.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you welcome from Coleman, Alabama, one of the South Street bands, Alabama's own Bama Band.
Only the music at the event, co-sponsored by WLWI Radio and Country USA, was slightly different than the traditional Stars and Stripes Forever. But everyone seemed to enjoy the sounds of country and western stars Hank Williams Jr. and Ronnie Millsap. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
The interstate system around Montgomery was not exactly crowded with holiday traffic. To the casual observer, there did appear to be a few more trucks than usual. This year, the 4th is on a Wednesday. With few exceptions, those off today will have to return to work tomorrow. This has apparently slowed the normal holiday traffic, not to mention the recent problems with the price and availability of gasoline. This service station, located next to the interstate, had no long line of eager customers. On the contrary, the manager said his business was much like a Sunday. He said most of his business came in the morning. Many other stations around town were closed, others were open, and those that were did not appear to have problems with long lines. The Southern Bypass, a normal busy route for Montgomeryans, seemed to suffer no adverse traffic problems due to the holiday. If the position of the holiday and the gas situation has deterred motorists, it has also served to save lives by virtue of the fact that not as many people are on the highways. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
You know, I didn't consider my win over Gerolitis a fluke. I've played him many times before, and I'd always had a good record against him. And that gave me a lot of confidence on the grass. And actually, the last few matches, should have been the favorite anyway. I've played guys who I'm ranked ahead of on the computer, and
you're not surprised then to be here?
No, I'm not surprised. Well, the win over Panada was probably an upset.
What about the crowd, Pat? Did they jar you with all their chanting and cheering?
They were probably. Yeah, they were affecting me at the beginning. I wasn't quite into the scene whatsoever at the beginning. They, kept me off balance. But I think it worked out better for me in the end because I put a lot more pressure on Panada, and the English crowd was really for me.
It's empty in this room right now, but sometime between July 10th and July 14th, probably on the 12th, this room in the basement of the State Administration's building in Montgomery will be manned by at least 4 civil defense officials. This is the operations room for the civil defense. The reason they'll be here is Skylab. Because of Skylab's imminent reentry, the state of Alabama has already drawn up a Skylab reentry plan. According to Alabama Civil Defense Skylab Project Officer David Oakes, this plan concerns itself with communicating messages from the national level through the state and on down to the local offices.
The word on Skylab, its condition, reentry, probabilities, and points will be relayed to us, and we in turn will keep everybody else advised minute by minute as we are informed. We'll man the post here right up to impact wherever it may occur.
NASA has set up tracking headquarters in Houston, Texas. During the projected final 12 hours before Skylab's time of impact, messages will be relayed concerning the probable path in which debris will fall. Officials say they don't know exactly where it will fall until at least 2 hours ahead of time. However, it will only take 2 minutes for the message to make it from the national level to each local civil defense office, utilizing the National Civil Defense Warning System. Officials here in Montgomery say your chances of being hit by a piece of Skylab are much less than those odds of your being hit by a meteorite. But nonetheless, and just in case, the Alabama Civil Defense will be at work. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
That election involved the present sheriff, Sheriff Thompson, and an individual who is now deceased, Bill Elliott.
Could you detail some of the charges for us?
Well, the charges fall in mainly 3 groups. A person voting more than one time, casting illegal absentee ballots, and vote buying.
All right, this is promising liquor or money in exchange for votes?
Yes, that's correct. 9 individuals are charged in a conspiracy with Sheriff Thompson and a deputy with obtaining liquor and or money to give to individuals to cast their votes for Sheriff Thompson. And on the other side of the coin, 7 individuals in this indictment are charged with doing basically the same thing for Bill Elliott.
Although many stations will be closed again this weekend, a AAA spokesman says many motorists should be able to find gas while they're on the road. Bancroft Timmons says that drivers seem to be coping with the 20 to 30% reduction in available gas by cutting down on driving. AAA also has been keeping track of gasoline prices around the state. The club's research shows that self-service gasoline has gone up 2 cents a gallon since last week, while gasoline at full-service pumps has risen an average of only ½ cent. Timmons says the reason for the big jump in self-serve gas is that more people are using those pumps in order to save a few cents. Before the gas shortage, not many people were interested in pumping their own gas, so stations thought they wouldn't lose much money if they offered the option. Now Timmons says gas stations have so many self-serve customers, they're raising prices to get a few more cents out of do-it-yourself pumpers. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Well, I'm sure they'd be glad for Arnold to play, and I feel that Arnold will play, but with or without him, it will be a success. There's too many great names, too many great players who are eligible for the senior circuit, and I think it makes for an outstanding event. And I think that Arnold, I think he will play. I think it may take him a little time. He still likes to compete on the regular tour, but I think Arnold eventually will play.
Any hope of jarring Hogan loose?
I would not be surprised if you wouldn't see him play occasionally.
Boy, you'd be there, wouldn't you?
Yes, sir. right with everybody else.
What is the general health of the PGA Tour these days?
Well, it's financially, I think it's as solid as it's ever been. We have just outstanding crowds every week. In fact, some of the places there's too many people. You can only accommodate so many people on golf courses. In some places, the crowds are just tremendous. Pro-Ams sell out way in advance, and financially, we're very, very solid.
When you go back to work?
I'll go back next week at Milwaukee.
And
Len Menick is known as a wildcatter. His Texas oil company finds oil and then sells it to big firms who then refine and sell it. He favors decontrol of oil prices, but not the president's windfall profits tax. He says the tax will discourage exploration and hurt small independents more than big oil companies. He says one problem is that many persons still don't believe there is an oil shortage.
Well, they're skeptical there's still a shortage, but if you look at the long lines, they shouldn't be skeptical long. I guess the best example I can give you is that we've got much longer lines in Dallas, Texas, and we got oil and gas right outside the city. And I was in line the other day, and I had an oil company credit card. And the guy knows me. He says, well, you're an oil company. You mean you're standing in this line for gas? I said, well, I don't have any more gas than you do. I'm a consumer. I have to have it the same way. But I think there's definitely a shortage, and people have got to realize it's going to be tight. And the thing about it is what do we do about it to ease that? That's the main thing now.
And what's the answer?
Well, I think we have to develop alternate sources and conserve. I think everybody can cut 10%. And then also turn the oil industry loose. Get them out from under control. We have been controlled on oil prices since the Nixon administration. And these price increases are blamed on big oil. But look at the prices of that imported oil. Our government's in an unusual position. While they're holding down domestic prices, they're subsidizing foreign oil imports, which they say are excessive and dangerous to our security. That's a bizarre situation, and I would think quite embarrassing. So we're saying we know the oil industry has to have some regulation, but decontrol us, let us operate in a free enterprise atmosphere, and see if we can't find additional oil, and even on the decontrol, tax it if we don't drill with it. If we put it all on the ground, fine, to find new production. If we don't, then tax all of it. But don't just tax part of it and then say we're going to, what are we going to do with it? We're going to support energy programs, but I think the oil companies can do a lot more to find production than the federal government can do with those taxes. And that's what we're looking for, is how can we increase our supply? That's the bottom line. If you don't have the supply, you're not going to have gasoline.
Are there any oil producers who are holding back on some oil that they've found?
No, I don't think so. We're the most heavily regulated industry in the country. We have to file reports on every well, every month. We have to file production records to get prices. That's set by the federal government. We have to file our production rate with the state to get an allowable. We have to file our inventory every month. So they know every well we drill, what its status is, whether it's producing, shut in, or how much it's making, because these are all controlled. So I don't think any is being held back. If there is, I sure don't know any about it, because I don't think it's possible.
You spoke of conserving. What do you do to conserve energy? People might be interested to know, since you're an oil producer.
Well, subconsciously, every time I get in the car, I figure out how I can drive a shorter distance than what I'd planned. And believe it or not, I ride my bicycle up to 7-Eleven instead of taking my car. Mm-hmm. But things like that, if we can just cut 10%, do you know if we could cut 10% of our consumption is 18 million barrels a day of crude oil. That's a lot. 10% is 1.8 million barrels. That's a lot of oil we could save and not have to buy foreign at $20 a barrel or more. So I think that's very important. And I think people can do it.
Lisa Nielsen reporting for Alabama Illustrated. Infested pines are easy to spot. Their red needles provide a striking contrast to healthy green trees. But surrounding pines won't remain green if dead trees aren't carried away. This year's southern pine beetle epidemic already is being compared to the one that began in 1973 and destroyed $200 million worth of trees. Hardest hit are Macon and Coosa counties. Alabama Forestry Commission workers are trying to prevent further damage by mapping infested areas from the air and then informing landowners of the problem. Jim Highland is an entomologist for the commission.
The way it shows up quickest is the needles turning red. It goes from green to red. Before that, you get pitch tubes on the side like popcorn on a green tree, and then from there the needles turn red.
What can people do to get rid of the beetle?
In the forest, the easiest way is to cut the trees out of the woods, take them to a mill, and at the mill, the logs are debarked and the beetles are killed. And a landowner with a homeowner or around the house, you have to cut the tree down and spray it with lindane insecticide.
Okay, but the main thing is to get it away from the healthy trees.
To get away from healthy trees, if you don't, it's just going to keep spreading. The spots will get bigger and you have more trees and more damage.
Each beetle is the size of a grain of rice. They're hard to see, but they leave tracks where they've burrowed into the bark. If you have pine trees you think are infested, you may call the Forestry Commission's toll-free number beginning Monday. That number is 1-800-392-5679. The pine beetle epidemic will not go away by itself, so the greatest weapon against the beetles is public awareness. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
A group of representatives from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference stood at the gate to Kilby Correctional Center today waiting to see Tommy Lee Hines, the retarded Coleman youth, convicted on charges of rape. Prison spokesman John Hale says the large contingency was unexpected. Only Senator U.W. Clement, Hines' attorney, and a photographer were originally expected.
There could have been a breakdown in communications somewhere, and that being a possibility, Senator called the governor's office. I don't exactly know who talked to who, but it ended up with Commissioner Britton talking with the Senator and making an agreement, since there were some other people here and since apparently there had been some confusion.
The SCLC National President, Dr. Joseph Lowry, State President Reverend John Nettles, Reverend R.B. Cottonreader, and Hines' father, Richard Hines, along with one other SCLC representative, were allowed to join Clemens in the prison for a visit with Hines. That visit lasted about 30 minutes. At a news conference held in downtown Montgomery, Lowry revealed the intent of the meeting, to reassure Tommy Lee Hines of their support.
We had prayer with him. We went to assure him of our continued support, our continued belief in his innocence, and our continued efforts to free him. We are more convinced now than ever that Tommy Lee Hines not only did not, but could not have committed the crimes for which he's been accused and convicted.
Hines' conviction is currently before the State Court of Criminal Appeals, and still ahead are trials on 2 other rape charges. All of it could, however, be overturned in competency hearings set for September 24th in Birmingham. The SCLC has held strong to its belief that Hines is too retarded to have committed the 3 rapes that he's charged with. Lowry says they intend to keep the case in as much national limelight as they can. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
There were representatives from almost every group connected with agriculture at the emergency meeting. Also attending were congressional representatives, state energy officials, and members of the Alabama Petroleum Council. Everyone is worried if farmers will receive enough diesel fuel to get their crops harvested, and if so, at what cost.
Alabama agriculture is facing a fuel shortage, and in some cases, field operations have been curtailed or stopped. Alabama's farmers have already lost millions of dollars worth of crops due to the fuel shortage and the transportation stoppage. Always keep in mind that without fuel on the farm, there is no food in the nation. Without fuel in the tanks, the food produced stays on the farm.
Those present received no long-range answers to their questions because no one, not even President Carter, is sure what action to take. However, the group did get some encouraging news about this month's diesel fuel allocation.
In July, the figure is about 44 million gallons. Now, in July of '78, the figure was about 38 or 39 million gallons. Based on those figures, I think there will be adequate supplies of diesel fuel in the state. The problem's going to be with the price.
Hudspeth says the price of diesel fuel from suppliers when it first enters the state can vary within a 64-cent range. He expects that during this month, farmers will have no problems getting all they want if they can pay the price. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
We got a lot of orders to get out.
There you go. Did we get that order out? Oh. I'm so mad. Can somebody get out and get some hamburgers? Oh, one.
London?
On all they have to do. They'll get balance in the morning.
All they do is call their time. Well, this is what I told him.
We're extremely worried that the people who truly need Skylab repellent won't be able to get it. But we're doing our best. We're working day and night, and we have on extra crews, and we've hired extra people, and we're doing our best to get Skylab repellent to everybody who needs it.
Isn't this kind of a self-defeating business? As soon as Skylab falls, then where are you?
Well, we feel that we will have fulfilled a very definite void in society, and for humanity, we feel that we're doing a good job providing a good service.
Okay, what about the recovery balm? Are you getting that ready?
It's being readied. Now, the research and development team has already perfected it, but it won't be available until Skylab has fallen, and we're not going to bottle it until Skylab has actually impacted on some person.
Some unfortunate person who was ignorant enough not to use your repellent.
Right.
Americans have always been in love with the automobile. Well, how often is it you have the chance to buy a piece of history and make a good investment? Throughout America, antique and rare cars are being bought and sold like stocks, except investors claim with a higher rate of return. One of those who believes there's money in classic automobiles is Rick Ragone. He flew into Montgomery this morning from Miami just to attend the antique car auction. He says he goes to nearly 30 such auctions a year just to find antique cars to sell at his own classic car showroom in South Florida.
10 years ago, the cars of the 30s were the car to have. Now, the new generation of buyers are people in my age bracket who are looking to buy cars that we grew up with. It's a nostalgia thing. The 40s and 50s cars are now the best cars because they're drivable, they're usable. You can drive them on an interstate. You can, drive them to work every day. They're usable. They're fun to look at. They got everything going for them. So with that combination, you have tremendous demand. All the wartime babies and all now in the 30s saying, gee, I always wanted a 57 T-Bird or a 57 Chevy convertible. And the prices are just skyrocketing.
There were automobiles from nearly every decade and from all over the Southeast. Auction officials say many residents bring their old cars to the event to sell for the highest price they can get, while others name their price, and if the highest bid isn't over their figure, they can reject the offer. As you were about to see, not everyone goes away happy.
I got 16 for a once, twice, third and final call, and I have closed the bid right down here at 16 1/4. Sir, you take your check home today. Can you sell the car? What would you take? $2,000, sir. Would you pay $2,000? We got close, but we didn't do any good. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
This is where the first armed robbery occurred, the Magic Mart at 2242 Lower Wetumpka Road. A 16-year-old black male entered the store around 2 a.m. and pulled a small caliber blue steel pistol. He made off with $137 in a blue Chevrolet driven by a 46-year-old man. The man had earlier stopped and given the youth a ride, and according to police, he did not know the youth was committing an armed robbery. The suspect was caught about 10 minutes later at Ann Street and the Atlanta Highway by officers Bertha Mills and Kathleen Morris. Another armed robbery early this afternoon was even more short-lived. Police say a 23-year-old Montgomery man, James Townsend Jr., pulled a knife on the attendant at the Citgo service station on the Upper Wetumpka Road shortly after 12:30. The manager then pulled this gun from a drawer and held the suspect until police arrived.
We had a unit very close by, and we were here in just a short time after the robbery went down, just a real short time, and the suspect was still here. We were here probably in a minute and a half.
Corporal Murphy said the suspect was under the influence of a combination of alcohol and barbiturates. No one was injured in the incident. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News.
At the request of the state's County Commission Association, the Montgomery County Commission voted to go on record as opposed to a bill pending in the Senate. The bill would pass 5 cents per voter name on polling lists onto the respective county's probate judge. The current method passes the cost onto the county fund. Letters to Montgomery County's 3 senators reflecting that position will be mailed. Only one of 3 bills considered by the commission got favorable reaction, and that bill would allocate $2.5 million to reimburse counties for the housing of state prisoners. In other business, the Montgomery Community Actions Agency's request for nearly $27,000 in operating funds was defeated. The report on the county's fuel allocation plan showed the Youth Facilities Department 41% below their allotted gasoline for the week. The Health and Engineers Department 22% below allowances. Sheriff's Department 17% below. The Appraisers Department used more than allotted, 13% more, and using 23% more fuel than allowed, the District Attorney's Office again is on bottom. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
This is the Sojourner Community, 100 rental apartments for elderly and handicapped people on a fixed income. The tenant's income determines the amount of rent, but the rent does not exceed 25% of the total income, and it includes all utilities. The apartments designed for the handicapped have special features that make life a bit easier, like extra-wide doorways, wheelchair showers, and sinks built so a wheelchair can roll under them. And each apartment has a panic button that the tenant activates in case of an emergency. Doris Overton, the resident manager, says the Sojourner Community is not a place for older people to go during their last days, but rather someplace where they can feel alive and independent. And the residents agree.
It's pleasant, happiness. I feel happy. I felt in quite a while, and I enjoy the place. And as the old saying goes, I'm happiest and that is in a 40-acre flat.
Only 43 apartments remain, and in the near future, a medical center and a small shopping complex will be built for the residents of this unique community. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News.
I just think this is a bill that there will be a lot of opposition to on the House Health Committee. It's further government regulation. I've been very pleased with the attitude of the other members of that committee, that they are very anti-government regulation oriented.
As late as it is in the session, what are the real chances of this bill and the companion bill in the Senate, which is the same thing, of being passed?
Very slim. The House Health Committee almost did not grant a public hearing on this legislation because we said there wasn't enough time to have the hearing and then have the necessary 5 legislative days, which is the minimum for a bill to go through the House and then go through the Senate.
Pensions and Security Commissioner Gary Cooper says the reorganization will enable the department to operate more efficiently. He says the new structure will also incorporate an affirmative action and civil rights section to help the department comply with the current court order. In other business, the board discussed the newly formed Welfare Fraud Unit. The fraud unit is working with the Attorney General's office and cracking down on improper action on the part of not only welfare recipients but also providers and employees who might otherwise be involved. The board also discussed the current operating budget and received a report on the volunteer efforts on behalf of the department in the state's 67 counties. The current nursing home problem also came up at the meeting. Several nursing homes in the state have said they will have to close because the state will not raise the maximum income ceiling for Medicaid nursing home patients, thus forcing some of them out of public and private nursing homes. Pensions and Security Commissioner Gary Cooper says while the problem is not theirs, they are preparing to help some of those who might be affected.
Well, some ways, of course, of financial assistance through old age pensions. We also provide a very important service called homemakers. And this is if an individual has a home to go to, we can provide an individual who might come and help them cook meals and clean for themselves and